some cases for advancing nationalism and loyalty, was also burdened by charges of corruption. As a result of that ineffective governance, several groups were united in trying to overthrow the monarchy. In an ironic twist, those groups included both right-wing and leftist groups as allies, and one of the groups on the left was the Khmer Rouge. Underpinning much of the unrest through the Civil War was massive income inequality, where Cambodians living in the urban areas enjoyed relative wealth and comfort, while the majority of Cambodians toiled on farms in the rural communities. This obvious division of class made Cambodia especially susceptible to revolution, the University of Minnesota analysis explains. The Cambodian genocide over those 4 years of Khmer Rouge rule was characterized by intense violence that saw between 1.5 and 3 million people killed at the hands of the Khmer Rouge, the Minnesota study outlines, which accounted for about 1/4 of the country's population. The genocide was the result of a social engineering project by the Khmer Rouge, in which they were attempting to create a classless agrarian society. The Khmer Rouge sought a radical reorganization of Cambodian society. This meant the forced removal of city dwellers into the countryside, where they would be forced to work as farmers, digging canals and tending to crops. Gross mismanagement of the country's economy led to shortages of food and medicine, and untold numbers of people succumbed to disease and starvation. The Khmer Rouge regime eventually collapsed when Vietnam invaded and sustained an occupation for more than a decade. Given the Khmer Rouge's focus was on a rural agrarian society, those considered an intellectual were targeted for special treatment. This meant teachers, lawyers, doctors, and clergy were the targets of the regime. Even people wearing glasses were the target of Pol Pot's reign of terror, the Minnesota research explains. To this day, even more than 4 decades later, older Cambodians who lived through that terror and need glasses still refuse to wear them. As the principals in our story will recount, the warm and hospitable Cambodian people they came to care for deeply still harbor that fear, and the economic ramifications are still being felt by the relatively impoverished population, including health and diet challenges such as iron deficiency anemia. In the end, Pol Pot evaded capture and was even able to wield power under the radar for many years. When the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia, UNTAC, came to the country in 1992, it engaged Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge as a necessary partner to bring peace to Cambodia, the Minnesota study explains. One of UNTAC's stated goals was to bring Pol Pot and other senior Khmer Rouge officials to trial. However, Pol Pot would die in 1998 before the trials took place. The years of civil war, Khmer Rouge brutality, and Vietnamese occupation left deep scars on the souls and bodies of Cambodians. Among those scars, and for our discussion here, the seemingly endless burden of poverty leaves people vulnerable to illness and disease, including iron deficiency anemia. Such health challenges are particularly acute in countries like Cambodia and are the focus of a range of international bodies and organizations trying to deal with the problem. Diets that don't provide the right levels of vitamins and minerals can compromise your immune system, impair your cognition and school performance, decrease your work productivity. This is a widespread problem impacting individuals, families, and communities everywhere in the world, although particularly in lower-income countries. Lynette Neufeld, director of the Food and Nutrition Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, explained in a recent article. Micronutrient deficiencies are highest in lower-income countries because diets often lack the diversity of nutrient-rich foods and tend to derive a large share of their calories from rice, wheat, maize, or similar staple foods. In fact, studies have concluded that 9 in 10 women in several countries in South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa are nutrient deficient. Though perhaps not as severe or common, deficiencies can also be surprisingly high even in